Hi, I'm Marianne, and today we're going to talk to Angie, who's a special ed teacher, and she's going to add some really interesting insights into what our discussion is with special needs kids.
Yes, thank you for having me, Marianne.
I'm so glad you're here, and you and I were just talking about this topic, so I'm just going to lead off with it, is what drew you to this field in the first place?
Initially, as I reflected and looked back on that question, and what did the bottom line, I would say the most profound thing for me is I'm an identical twin. By birth, I came into this world as my own human being, but identified as a twin. And being identical, that word means just alike. Mm-hmm. So in any event, there was a struggle throughout my life, which required me to be an advocate for myself and demonstrating to people that I was my own individual, whether that was ownership of my less than wonderful characteristic traits or whether it was ownership of my strengths. Mm-hmm. I had to remind people I was my own spokesperson and that my voice mattered too. Mm-hmm. That was very important to me. And I had my own weaknesses in school. I struggled with math predominantly. My sister, on the other hand, struggled with a conventional system that required her to stay in school. She wanted a shortened day, and she wanted to be out and about. We were totally different, and this drove our school insane. Every school that we attended, and we went to traditional public school, but we were so different, and we were never accepted because we were different.
You couldn't fit in their box, right?
They spent so much time trying to squeeze us, and when I say us, both of us. We were identical, so we needed to be just alike. And we needed to be just like all of our other peers, too. They didn't see us as, or each of us, or myself as an individual like any other student, trying to create my own path, focus on my own strengths and find strategies and coping mechanisms for my weaknesses.
Wow. So did you always know then you wanted to work with special needs kids, or did you just know I want to help kids with their own identity?
Later on in high school, I had the opportunity to participate in the Special Olympics, and also when I was growing up, and I started school in 1977 as a kindergartner, so that tells you around what time I was in school. In regards to special education or people that weren't the same as you, there was one classroom in each school that I attended, public school, that had children in it. Looking back, I know where those students, what type of disabilities you might find. And these were for students that were extremely severe and profound. But they were kept in one room all day long. And they got to come out for lunch, things like that. We may see them passing in the hallways. Everybody was just encouraged to look the other way and not stare.
Ooh, that feels bad to me, yeah.
And that's how we were told to handle that type of thing, and it was the way things were. Then when I was invited to participate in Special Olympics, I did, and I realized that I asked, what am I supposed to do? And they said, just help your friends be able to participate in their activities. I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And they paired me up with a girl that was in one of my classes I never knew had epilepsy. And all I had to do that day was be her guide and do what I would do any other time, cheer her on. And I realized that I had no idea there were any differences.
She wasn't so different, yeah.
Yeah, there were no differences. But I felt really honored that she was able to share her weakness and show how she was overcoming it so she could fully participate. I never knew that there was a Special Olympics or something separate.
Wow.
And it did bother me that it was separate. So then as time went on, I started hearing more and more in the news. I started college initially to be an English teacher with a double major in social work. I knew I wanted to work with children, and I knew that I wanted to work with people that do things differently because I do too. And that's how that led me from the beginning to where I am now.
Have you always been at the same school? Have you always been at the same level? Or did you work in elementary, high school, middle school? What's been your experience over the years?
I started out at Loudoun County Youth Shelter, which was a program at that time that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And at that time it was considered at risk. So children that are actually young adults, is what adolescents, they might be in conflict with their parents. They may have made a bad decision. This was prior to juvenile detention centers, things like that. It was more of a therapeutic,
intervention,
structured center, community-based, and that's what led me there. And then I noticed, that was when I was first introduced to the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, because I began working for a program called the Young Adults Project, YAP, in Loudoun County. And it led to helping kids in their education, and I got more insight, and I realized how I could dig deeper and be a part of focusing on them being as successful as they could within school, work, life, all avenues.
And so, so you've got some experience with kids that learn differently and so forth. So what would you say to a parent? What's the first thing they should do as they need to communicate with the school now to help their kid navigate that road?
That's a very good question. And that's very difficult for parents. And I believe the difficulty first arises with, does a parent know what they're looking for? For example, if somebody already has another child that's been through the process, then 9 times out of 10 they know exactly where to go, or they're on the same street. You know?
Sure.
A parent that has no idea, they have a concern, and that could range from an emotional concern, an educational diagnosis that they received at the doctor, a family member who sees something and they don't. It's really, the most important thing is for a parent who doesn't know exactly what they're asking for or what they're concerned about, is to contact the principal. I recommend both by phone and by email. And what I suggest is calling the principal and saying to them, I am concerned about my child. And when the principal asks you, what are your concerns? If they are educational, if your child is struggling, and that I say struggling loosely defined, because parents see things differently at home than we see. So we're shared time with your child all day. Every concern is valid. Bring it up and ask them, I'd like to have a child study team meeting. Because
and who would be involved in that?
The child study team meeting in my local school district, it varies from state to state as far as the requirements. But of course, with it being the educational venue, we're going to reach out for all parties that are part of that child's educational process. So you would have an administrator, and at times the administrator can designate somebody else, and they don't do that to get out of your child's meeting. They do that because they want the expert that needs to be there to help navigate this process. So I ask parents, and I pre-warn them, not warn them, but inform them that by someone not showing up or giving a designee, that's because that's what your child needs. So we have the principal, we have special education teacher, we have a general education teacher, and not just as many special ed teachers who know your child, as many general ed teachers that know your child. We reach out to all of them. If there's a possibility you also think your child may do well if they had a keyboard with them the whole time throughout the day, we would invite assistive technology. If your child's getting older and you're really worried about transition, we're going to invite the transition specialist. And
so it's all very individual about your particular kid.
And it doesn't have to be just one meeting. A parent might get there and you spend the entire time answering their questions and trying to formulate exactly what it is.
So it might be one meeting or a series of meetings?
It should be a series of meetings, but initially.
And then they're going to form a plan. Is that where they would form an IEP plan?
No, not yet.
Okay.
And it would depend. It would
Okay.
depend if you have a parent who's calling and their contact is my child's already gone through all the previous steps and they've been found eligible for an individualized education plan. When are we going to have this meeting? Where's the draft?
Yeah.
They're very specific. They should let the principal know that, and then that whole IEP team will convene.
Okay.
And the IEP team, by law, does include administrator or designee, special ed teacher, general education teacher, anybody who's providing services or we think maybe this child might benefit. So we're going to talk about it.
Okay.
And a team meeting, that's what it is. It's a team meeting where we are discussing either an initial plan, a yearly review, in mid-year, whatever time we need to reconvene because the child's not making progress, and all those team members.
Okay. And so
be
that's
there.
an individual education plan for your
as well
child.
as the parent, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there other kinds of plans like that?
Yes.
Or is that what they get?
There are, and we hear this come up in the community world. There is the IEP, which is the Individualized Education Plan, which is enforced by federal law under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Okay.
And it requires, if a student is found eligible, we would develop an individualized education plan, and when I say we, it would be all the team members, including the parent. They're probably the most important part in establishing an IEP, and that would be one route to go. Then you have the other side where parents will request or the school may recommend, what have you, it depends on what the child's needs are,
Right.
a 504.
And what is that and how is that different?
The 504 is the Civil Rights Disability Act. So you, myself, every other human being that we know that's a United States citizen is eligible for a 504 plan if they meet the criteria, whether it's in school or the workforce. Those are your civil rights.
Okay. Okay. So somehow a child can get support in the school if they don't qualify for an IEP plan for whatever reason. They might qualify for a 504 plan.
Right, they may, yes.
And get
504
support.
plans much more broad. The state of Virginia has a list of disabilities with the eligibility criteria for each.
Okay.
And that's where we're looking just at the student in an educational setting. That's for school, for them to access that free education.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
And the 504 goes with them to college or workplace.
Okay. All right. So here's a question for you that I want to talk about briefly before we're done, because I think it's really important, because all these parents have a lot of stress and a lot of emotion involved in getting the best help, the best direction for their kids. And I imagine that at some times with this team, it can get testy, it can get scary, it can get, I don't know, abusive
Horrible.
or whatever.
It's just, it could be unhealthy.
How can you help a parent? Can you give them some tips on how to navigate that, working with that team?
Absolutely. One thing I would suggest is I always encourage parents and new special ed teachers and anybody who knows anybody with a friend with a child with any sort of special needs. There's a poem, it's called Holland, and it is about a family or a woman who essentially compares her pregnancy and what she thought was going to be to if you or I had planned a trip for a really long time and we were supposed to land in Holland or land in Italy with all of our friends and exploring life, and we had all these planned events, but instead we were the only one that landed in Holland. Acceptance comes in its own way for every parent, even within couples from the same family.
Yeah.
And I think my best practice for that is following the parents' lead.
Okay.
Not trying to push what I think or what I see onto them, especially personally, to recognize if they're still going through acceptance. Parents are humans. They want the compassion and empathy.
Sure, absolutely.
I think that's very important, and that's part of building a relationship.
But I imagine the teachers want that compassion and empathy too, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
it goes both ways, I would think.
Absolutely. And I look at it like parents, and I'm a parent myself, would not take my children to a doctor I didn't trust the recommendations and
Correct.
the decisions that they made. And I would want the parents, I work towards establishing that relationship. And I will be completely honest, you always have the human factor. Sometimes I'm not the best case manager for a parent.
Okay.
And as a human and a professional, I need to recognize that there's other options for that child.
Okay.
And I need to extend that to a parent.
So you're talking flexibility is
Right.
really, and open-mindedness.
Right, maybe there's a different case manager who may, and a case manager is also a special education teacher.
So a parent never has to feel railroaded into, this is the stream your kid's in.
But I've seen all parties feel railroaded
Yeah,
at one part or
okay.
another. And obviously parents,
So how do you not feel railroaded? How does a parent not feel railroaded? What can they do?
I honestly believe that parents, I would recommend that they expect the best in the team that's provided to them. To keep in mind they are a team member, and because we're all on the same team, to remember that we all feel railroaded at times, but you should feel safe enough with the team members that you can speak up. Try to calm yourself down, because we all get emotional with our children, and we understand.
Lots of deep breaths.
Right.
Yep.
Right. We totally understand. To keep in mind that there's going to be things that you're going to agree or disagree on with all of us involved, and that it's not the school system versus you. To
good point.
really just try, keep your eye on the prize. It's about the child, and the more that you stay focused on your child, and of course we're only human, parents will have, tears will fall, arguments will happen, life happens. But we all have a choice in how we react to things. And if we could just keep that in mind, that we are a team and it's all about the child. That's the most important thing. And when they get angry and things like that about the whole process, I feel the same way too.
Yeah.
And when to channel that anger, I beg them, I suggest with them. The intent of the IDEA was not to establish a sub-school, meaning special ed over here and general ed over here. But if you look from the top down, you can see it on districts nationwide. There is a special ed section and players that are at the same management level as they are in the general ed. And we will never close the gap, in my humble opinion, until we model and practice what we preach. If we are going to preach having the least restrictive environment for students and being able to put those things in the classroom like we're supposed to, then we have to communicate. And that has to happen from the top down, not just when we're in the IEP meeting.
And communicate in a kind, straightforward, respectful manner.
Absolutely.
Even when you want to blow your top, or even if you're feeling scared or angry.
And to know that we understand that, and to know if you lose it, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're less than. We all love our children.
Right.
And I definitely, one thing I really, really, really want parents to understand is we see all the strengths in your children, and we wish we could just dance around and scream and put them all into the present level of performance within the IEP.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's a legal document that has guidelines of what elements need to be included. And they don't want us to yell and scream about all the strengths and things your child has overcome, because then they don't need an IEP. And our goal is not to keep kids in special ed forever. Our goal is, if they learn enough coping mechanisms and strategies related to their disability and accessing the curriculum, then they move on. They don't need services. But if your child does, please don't take offense when you see this stuff. We cringe too, but that's the way the system is designed.
So you got to do the best you can within this system. It's your child's best chance.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is really good information. So, but I don't want to end unless you've got something
No, go
that
ahead.
you want to, is it final advice for a parent? I mean, I heard you say loud and clear, keep your eye on the prize. It's about the kid,
Yes.
and that kind of
And,
thing.
well, and the thing is too is understand, just like all of us are at home with a family. There's times that we all feel like an octopus, and I feel like that all day at school, trying to serve, the children as best I can. But behind the scenes, I'm the one who's saying, your child, reaching out, the child needs this, it's in their IEP. The child needs this, why aren't we putting it in the IEP? IDEA says we have to find the money. I don't want to hear about money. I'm the one that has to go to bat with my own colleagues, for lack of better terms. And I'm constantly trying to smooth it over, just like the parents are. I'm that person. And I hope all special ed teachers are. I haven't met one who isn't yet. But we're a different type of teacher in the trenches. I look at my position as a learning specialist because I do it different ways.
Right.
I tell my students, especially as they go into high school and they're transitioning, a lot of them discover for the very first time that they have an IEP.
Right.
And they're shared with all those weaknesses, right?
Right, right.
And I always tell them this, and I encourage parents to tell their children this too, depending on their disability, if they can understand the analogy. I'll say to them, when you go to the grocery store and you can buy the refrigerated cookies that are already scored and you can put them on the cookie sheet, and you go, what do you get? What do you get?
You get a cookie.
Okay,
Yeah.
I said, or you can follow grandma's recipe, okay? And then you
If
put
she'll
it in the
give it
oven.
to you.
She'll give it to you. And then you put it in the oven. What comes out?
Cookies. Okay. Different
Same.
ways of doing things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what my job is, right from the IEP all the way throughout and beyond. And I would say to parents also, get out there and advocate, because these children graduate, and then what?
Right.
Then what? Then what happens?
So things don't end at high school.
No.
Life continues on.
Right. They still need to be supported, and we need to look into avenues for them to show their strengths within our communities and make sure they have places to live, and that they can access it just like us.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, Angie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really, really appreciate that insight. And I think a lot
Thanks
of it
for
was
asking.
really, really helpful for what our parents can do. And so
Yes.
thank you for joining us. And remember, take a deep breath and keep your eye on the prize, because the prize is your kid.